Okay, so good evening. So today we're going to be building a tip calculator application today, and this is basically what we're going to be. This is basically what we're going to build, right? And then of course we're going to improve the design for it to, look better, and then of course we incorporate material design principles much later. But the idea of this application is to help you to get input from the user. Of course, when we're learning Kotlin, you're able to do your you know um read line, read int, and all that to get input from the user and then perform a particular what task. So how do we get to do that also in Android Studio, right? Okay, so let's just get to it. So what are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be exploring more views. Okay, we've looked at the text view, we've looked at the image view, we also looked at the button, right? So we're going to explore more views like the edit text, the switch, the radio button, and radio group. Okay, in this whole application we're going to be building, and then of course we'll also look at building layouts from the XML. Okay, we're not going to go through the drag and drop method. We're going to go straight to the XML and build it. And then of course, like I said, how we can get inputs from the user. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to you know cover. So let me go to my Android Studio and let's start. So you can let me know on the chats or if you can see my Android Studio. Okay. Okay, good. Good. That's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna do something, but you're not going to do it. Okay. For every application you're going to open a new project. Okay. But I'm going to just use the same one. Okay, because I just want to explain something. I'll just use that to remind you of something that I actually told you about. Okay. I want to use the same application, just same project to build the second application. But of course, when you're actually doing yours, don't do it that way. Create a new project. Okay. So I'm going to create a new application, a new activity rather, and I'm going to just call it um so let's just call it tip activity. Generate layout file. Yes. So here I'm going to check this because I want this activity to be the launcher activity, meaning that when this application runs, I want this activity to be the what entry point. I want it to be the entry point. Okay. So I'm going to just do that. But remember, before now, right, our main activity was the entry point. So I'm just going to go to my manifest. So you see that main activity has launcher, tip activity has launcher also. Now, if I run this application like this, two of them will run, but you see two different applications on your phone, right? You see two different app icons. Okay, so I'm just going to take out this indents filter from my main activity. I'm just going to take this out. Right. So I'm just going to leave it for the tip activity. Okay. So that means that this is going to be the entry point. The tip activity is going to be the entry point of my application. Okay. So I'm going to just close out every other thing that's here. So we head straight into what we have for today. Okay. So yeah, let's start. So to design this, we're going to be using a few things just like I listed. Okay, so this is our tip activity. So I'm just going to go to the layout of it so we get to designing it. So like I said, we're going to use XML. So let's just talk a bit, right? Um, so the UI elements we're going to be using to build that, we're going to use the edit text, we're going to use text view, we're going to use radio button, we're going to use radio group, we're going to use switch. So the edit text, okay, is for entering and editing text. Okay, just like your input field, when you want to fill it, type in a password, type in your mail and stuff like that. Okay. So that's what the edit text is for entering and editing text. The text view is just to display text. Okay. Now a radio button is basically just a, kind of like a selectable, if you've used probably if you filled a form, right? For some of you, I feel probably a table, whatever form, there's what we call multi options, like a circle. You can just select one out of many. Okay, so that's what just a radio button. The radio group is just a group of radio buttons, right? Now, switch is just a toggle, right? It's just a toggle UI to kind of toggle, things off and on. So for our text view, okay, it's just going to represent where we'll show, certain just like a question or something. So let's just I just wanted to get that out of the way, right? Now, like I said, we're going to be using an XML, and it's going to be very important that you understand how to design your layout using the XML. Okay, it's very, very important. Okay, so let me probably let's just go back like we never, you know, talked about it in the first place. Better still, let me just do this here. So you can see this. This is a constraint layout, right? Which is a view group, right? Because it's like a container that will house other views. Okay. So here, let me just do this. So line 2, this is what we call a starting tag. Okay, this is what is called a starting tag. Another thing you need to understand is that each of your UI elements, being a text view or whatever elements, is actually represented by an XML what element in your XML. So if I added an image here, it's also represented as an XML. And an XML starts with a start tag and an end tag. Okay, so line 2 is the start tag, and then line 10 here is the end tag, or you can call it a closing tag. Okay, so it starts with a this greater than sign, right, and then ends with this starts with a less than, ends with the greater than, right? But of course, you have this less than with a slash, right? Okay, so the whole of this is the end tag, right? While this is the what start what tag, and then inside of it, right here, inside all this, right, we can have what other elements that have what attributes. So, but these are the attributes of this what um constraint layout, right? These are the attributes. It has a width, it has a height, it has a context, it has some tools that you can make use of, right? So those are that's just something you should, just know about, right? So let's actually just go straight into it, right? Okay, so first of all, I'm going to bring in a text view here. Let's just start designing. I'm going to try to be a bit fast. So probably maybe we may just at least finish the UI and maybe get into the actual code. So for the text view, one of the attributes so you can see how it all starts, right? So you open a less than, right? Sorry. And then you type in the elements once you see. So this is text view. When you click enter, it tries to give you some declared attributes, which is the height and the width, because these are the two most important, right? Now, so I remember we talked about wrap content and the like. So I'm going to say wrap content. The height also, I'm going to say it should wrap the word content. So these are the attributes. So let's give it another attribute, a text attribute. So what is the text that's going to be displayed on the text view? So I'm just going to say that the text should be, let's just give a default, right? Hello world, just like Okay, so I want to just assume that we have not talked about it. So you can see the moment I give it a text attribute, right, you can now see it shows up here. Okay. Then the next thing is to constrain it. Okay. So our constraints, yes, you can also do it from the XML, because every layout has a top, a bottom, a left, and a right. So for this, I'm probably just going to say, just for a test run, okay, for the test run, I'll say the top of this element called the text view should be constrained to the top of the parent. So the parent there is the constraint what layout. I could also say bottom. You can notice that I just start by typing, a word, right? Or words that kind of gives me a hint as to what I'm looking for. Once I see it, I just click enter. So you can see bottom to bottom of parent, right? You can see how that moves. Start to start off, you can see that, and I'm going to say parent. End to end off, and I'll also say parent, right? So I'm done. So I'm done with every attribute I want to give for now. Okay, I'm done with it. So what's the next thing? I need to close it. So now there are two ways you can close. Now you just do shift and your greater than sign. You get to see it like this, right? Now you can actually just click enter, and this is fine. You have closed it. But we use this, just use this only if this element here, which is this text view, we will have a child view, probably to have another element inside of it. Just like you can see, we have this constraint layout. This text view is inside of it. You can check it from the indentation and you can see the line here, right? But this text view is not going to have anything inside. So you don't need to close it this way, right? So I'm just going to delete this and then put a dash right here. Okay. Forward slash, right? Yeah, that should be forward or backslash. I think it should be forward or back. It's usually very confusing. Okay. So that's actually what that's how you close a tag. So you can see we have given our elements here, right? One other thing we could just do is the size attributes, because it text to have size. I'll just type size and then I see text size, and then I could just say let's say 24 sp text size. Okay, I had already saved this, so you can see it gets bigger. So that's basically how you do that. Okay, so this indentation helps shows you the hierarchy. Okay, so here the constraints layout is the parent layout, the text view is the what child what layout. Okay, is the child. So the attributes for each element are also indented. Also, if you look at it, these attributes are also what indented, and they are part of this what element. Okay, this just helps you to also to read your code. Now you can also notice the color coding, right? How some things are green, some things are orange or yellow rather, some things are I think this is purple. So then you have the ones that are white. So all these things, right? They are just helping you to know what is what. Okay. So you can notice that the start and the end tag is the same color, right? Okay. So now, but it can be different in your own. Probably your updated, where either yours is a higher version or a lower version. The coloring might change, but it just helps you to distinguish what things. That's all. Okay. So yeah, let's move on. Let's move on. So let me just yeah, I think I've talked about that. So let's move on. Let's move on to so one other thing I'm just going to explain is this guy here, line 3 to line 5, right? Line 3 to line 5. So now the question is, what is this? What is this here? What's this? What's this whole thing? Okay. So first of all, this XMLNS, right? Okay. Basically what it stands for is XML namespace, right? That's basically what it stands for. It stands for what XML was namespace, and each line defines what to call a schema, or if you don't call it schema, it's basically just a vocabulary of attributes related to those what words. Like for example, this Android, this Android here, okay, this is a namespace. So, for example, it marks attributes that are defined by the Android what system. So layout width is an attribute that is defined by the Android what system. So all the attributes in your layouts, they begin with one of them. It's either it has the Android namespace, it has the app namespace, or the tools namespace, right? That's why you have this tools or context. So basically, tools namespace are just for design time, right? Basically, just for design time. We'll get to actually practice that, right? Okay, so yeah, I think that's basically that. Okay, that's basically that. So let's move on to something else, right? I'm just trying to kind of touch a few things, right, before we get into the actual building of the layouts. Okay. Okay, so first of all, so let's get into it, right? Let's get into it. So the first thing we saw, okay, so let me do something. Let me get that. Can I get that image? So let me get that image so we are able to, you know, we are able to see. Let me get that image. So we are able to, see what it is, kind of focus on what we are doing so we can be looking at it. So just give me a second. I just want to import it into our Android studio so we can just, we can just check it out while we are building to be sure we are doing the right thing. So just give me a second. Okay, so just copy this. Don't know how to paste it in my drawable here. Okay, so let me just say, let me just call it tip sign, and then this PNG should not be capital letters, just a small letter. Okay, so let me open it up. Okay, good. So, sorry, that was too much. Okay, so this is basically what I want to, build. So, yeah, just needed to let's see that. Okay, so the first thing is first, let's work out this cost of service. So we're going to use an edit text because we want the user to, type in the cost of the service. Okay, we want the user to type in the cost of the service. So let's actually check that out now. So how do we do that? So I'm just going to call, so I'm just going to clear this, right? Let's just clear this, or we're going to use a text somewhere, right? So let me just keep it. We're going to use text somewhere. So it's an edit text, right? So just going to open it, say edit text, right? Click enter. So now from this design, it should help to you know about the width and the height. So you can see the width is not too long. It doesn't actually get to the end. So we're just going to use a wrap content. And the height also, we're going to use a wrap content. Okay. So what other attributes of, the edit text do we need, right? Okay. First of all, you need to give it an ID because we're going to make use of it. We're going to use it. So for the ID, I'm just going to call it, for now, let's just say text input and modify that later. What are the attributes of the edit text? Now, another attribute of the edit text is what we call the input type. So what do you want the user to impute? What exactly? Do you want them to impute just a text? Do you want them to impute a number or whatever? So for now, let's just say text. Okay, let's say text. And then let's close this out. Right. So you can see we have that. So these are edit text. But you're not seeing anything. Still doesn't look like what it should be, right? It's like a shadow of what it should be. Okay, so let's constrain it because one of the things it's shouting here, you can see this red, line. You can see this the view is not what constrained, right? So let's add some constraints. So just before the end, I'm going to say top. I'm going to say top to what's top to top of no top to top of yeah top to top of parents. Let's constrain it, top to the top of parents. Then let's also constrain the start, which is your left, start to start of what parent also. Okay, so that gives us what that. Okay, so yeah, that's for the word constraints. Okay, that's for the constraints. So but we still kind of don't have what we need in a way because we can actually here you can see cost of service, you can see where it is, right? But we don't have this yet. Okay, we don't have this yet. So what do we actually need to what do we need to do? So let's look at this. First of all, we have our ID, which is fine, right? I think we talked about ID in the last class, right? That an ID basically is just a unique resource name for the element. Okay, so when you add a view or resource or everything, Android actually automatically assigns resource IDs for them. But when you manually type out the XML, you have to explicitly do that. Okay, you have to explicitly do that yourself. So let's look at the the height attributes of this edit text, right? So we've set it to wrap content, which means that the height will be as tall as the content inside, which is fine because there will only be one line of text. So I'm not going to have two or three or four lines. But the width attributes is set to just wrap what content, right? Now we can actually do match parents, but match parents, kind of will not. Okay, so this is basically what match parent means. So it's going to just be as wide as the what parents. Sorry. Okay, sorry, not for the heights, for the width. Assuming we make the width match parents. So you can see how wide it is, right? You can see how wide it is. So but that's basically not what we want to do, right? So kind of not want it to be huge. So we can just basically give it a fixed width of 160 dp and then extract that dimension. Remember, very, very important, right? Very, very important. So I could just say dimension this. Okay, so now that's the width. Okay, so I think that's, well, no, a bit close. Okay, that's a bit close, right? Okay, so let's check out this attribute again, right? The input type. We put text before, right? We're just putting something, but think about it. Text means that user can actually type in text characters like A, B, C, and everything, right? Alphabetical characters and the likes. But the question is that what we want? No, we want to calculate the cost of something. We need a figure, we need numbers, right? So we're going to change that, okay, to, and we're going to use, so we have number decimal, we have number password, we have number sign. So we're going to use number what decimal, right? So in case you have, somebody wants to put 5 point something, 8 point something, so number decimal, okay. And then we need a hint because we need a hint. You can see this cost of service is a hint. It hints the user as to what he or she should actually type in. So I'm going to say, I'll just type hints and I'll see it. And then I'm going to say cost of service. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of it's coming up. So cost of service. Yeah, so it's coming up. We're getting there, right? We're getting there slow and steady, right? Okay. So well, this is nice, right? This is nice, but doesn't really just give us everything. So we can actually, if you notice, it's too close to the top and to the start. So you could also just do a margin top, that's top margin, we could say should be 16 dp. We don't have any dimension we stored for 16 dp, so I can just create one, right? And then the bottom margin, sorry, start should be 16 also. So good, that kind of brings it out, right? So we are kind of getting closer. So you see, it's very important when you're actually, especially when I give you a design, you need to be able to pay attention to the tiniest of what details. You need to be able to pay attention to the tiniest of details. So the next thing is, there's this text here, this question, how was the service? So that's just a text view. So yeah, I think that's why I did not delete this because we will use it. So I'm just going to, now of course I wanted to, if you notice here, it's below this guy, and they kind of just start out somewhere, like the same. So I'm just going to do, of course, you have done constraint layouts. I've talked about this. I'm just going to take the top of this, sorry, click that again to the bottom of this guy, right? I'm going to take out the bottom constraints. Okay, so is it better now? Is it still very low? You can unmute and let me know. Hello, can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I kind of want to know. I want to know if you can hear me well properly. I think that's what's more important. So if it's clear, then let's. If it's clear, let's go ahead. If it's clear. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to take out this bottom constraints. I don't need it for the text here. Then the start. Going to take the start to start of this guy, right? Then I'll take out the end constraints because I don't need it. It's kind of just, and then take out this text size for now. Or maybe you can just put it back and then give something, let's say, 13. That's still small. 15 or yeah, 16. Uh, okay, I'll just say 20 SP. I'm just going to extract that. So I don't think I'll be extracting every time here. So because of time. So okay, so the text there, what did we have? We had how was the service? So how was the service? Okay, so I think it needs to be smaller because this other guy is bigger. So uh let's just make it a 16. So 16 SP. Like I said, you just when you're doing yours, you just extract. Okay, so yeah, so the next thing is this guy. So these are radio buttons, right? But we have what we call a radio group. So a radio group is basically just a group of group of radio buttons. Okay, that's basically what it is. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on. So of course we should also give it an ID. So can just call it service question, right? Okay, so that actually is fine. Okay, so yeah, let's move on to the next thing, right? Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so yeah, the radio group, right? Let's go to the radio group. So now the radio group is just a group of radio buttons, like I said. So how do we get that there, right? How do we get it? So I'm just going to say radio group. Okay. Now the width should wrap the content. The height also should wrap the content. Okay. So I'm going to, yeah. So let me just say this, right? So basically, the is going to just have what's it called? It's going to just have those options, right? It's just going to have all these options. So inside that radio group, we're going to have three radio buttons, right? Of which each button has a text in it, right? More like an explanation of what it is, right? So now let's move on. Now, our radio group has what to call an orientation attribute. Orientation attributes meaning how do you want the radio buttons to be arranged? Do you want it to be arranged vertically or horizontally? In our case, we want it to be arranged vertically. Okay, so for constraining, I'm going to constrain the top of it to the bottom of the service question. Okay, and then the start also should constrain to the start of the service question, which is this guy. So that's why you should give IDs, because of course without IDs you can't actually have constraint layouts because you don't have anything to constrain it to. Then the ID of this radio group, we call it the tip options, because that's basically what it actually kind of does. So these are just the attributes we want, right? Do we have it somewhere? So these are the attributes we want to use an underscore instead of a hyphen, right? These are the attributes we want for the radio group. So let's close it, but I'm going to close it in this way. The reason is because now I want to have, some, elements inside of it, which is the radio button. I want to now have radio buttons inside the radio group, right? Okay, so let's add that. So I'm going to add a radio button, right? So now what's the radio button? The width and the height, okay, is going to wrap content. Okay, so you can see that, right? We have that already. And then I'm going to add a text attribute. So what text do we have here? Okay, amazing in brackets 20%. Okay, so I'm going to say amazing in brackets 20%. Sorry. Okay, so you can see, it's kind of coming up. Let me zoom in a bit. Yeah, so you can see it's actually, coming up, right? So now that we've done this, so we can now add the rest. Okay, so I'm going to just close this. So each of them, we should give them an ID, right? So let me give an ID here. And this is an option. So what option? Option 20. Let's just say option. Let's just call it option 20. You can actually say option 20%, which is not bad. Okay. And then, so I'm just going to duplicate this, right? And then make some modifications because we need to have it, right? So you can see now. So this second one, the second one should be good 18. The other one is okay 15. So this is option 18, 18%. So, and it's, what was the text there? Good, good, and then 18. And then this is option 10, if I'm not mistaken. And that is just, that was just, okay. And then 10. All right, so let me confirm 10%. Okay, 15. Okay, 18 and then 15. Okay, sorry about that. 15. Okay. So yeah, it's coming along. I know you're now seeing you're now seeing a lot of things, right? So okay, so now when you get to work with radio um buttons, you can actually, since you have a group, you can decide to choose a default option. I know you've probably filled some forms that you can have a default option. So how do you do that? You do that in the group. You specify that attribute in the group. Okay. So in the group, radio group, there's an attribute called checked button, right? So for the checked button, which button do I want to be checked? So I'm going to call the ID, which is this option 20. So you can see immediately it is checked. And this color is basically just the color of my app theme color. That's what it's using. So you can change that later. So whatever it is that you actually want, right? So that's basically that. This is what we have done so far, right? So nice. So we still have a few things. We have this button, we have this other text to, to deal with, right? So let's move on, right? Let's see how much we can do in the short time that we have. Okay, so let's complete. So next is to add this. So this is a switch, right? This is a switch. So we have a switch widget in Android. Basically, it allows the user to select yes or no. So in this case, we want to ask once if the user should round up the tip. Should we round it up? Rounding up to like a whole number. Because if you're using a decimal, if the person probably puts 2.8, you understand, you basically have to have a decimal at the end. So do we want to round it up? Right. So looking at this, this switch should be as wide as the parent. So these are not two different views. So this is not a text view and then a switch button, right? This is just the same thing, and I'll show you how actually we can, how to implement that. Okay, so let's move. So just below the radio group, so we're gonna have our switch. Yep, which is this. So the width, right, should, let's make the width. So I'm going to do something, right? Okay, let's make it to match parents for now. And then the width, the height rather should, wrap content. Okay. So let's give it an ID. Okay. And I'm going to call the ID roundup. Okay, gonna call it roundup. So where's our switch? So you can see our switch here. You can see it here. So let's constrain it. So I want it, the top of it. So we're using XML. So top to bottom of, I think we have something about group tip options. Yes, which is the group. Yes. So let me zoom out a bit. So you can see that brings it down. Now I want the start. Okay, the start should be the start of parent and the end should be the end of what's parent. So start of parents. Let's just do this. End to end of parents, right? And then I'm just going to, let's just close this first. Okay, we can still add. So, yeah, so I'm going to, okay, something is shouting. Okay, so based on update and everything, so we're being told to use, so if I just hover on this, so we are told to use switch compact from the app compact or switch material. So we're going to use switch compact when we get to talking about material icon, material design, then we'll talk about. So let's use the switch compact. Yeah, so that's fine. So for the width, I want the width to match constraints instead of matching the parents, right? Because if I tell you to match constraint, it means that if I constrain the left to this guy, right, it's just actually still it will match that constraint. So no matter what, wherever this text goes, it will follow it, right? But I don't want it to do that. That's the parent. Let's start the parent. So another option I want to give, I want this to be checked by default also, right? I want it to be checked like it's selected. So it has the attribute called checked, which is a true or false. So you see checked true, you see it actually toggles it. Then of course you have a text here. We have a text called roundup tip. So going to give it a text attribute called round up tip, right? So you can see that that gives you the our text, right? That gives you our text. So yeah, that's actually that, right? But kind of doesn't feel like it's aligned, right? So that's why I'm going to just make this here, so you can see they kind of just feel like they're aligned, right? Okay. And if you notice, they're all clustered together, right? They're all clustered together. We'll give them breathing space, because if you check it out from the blueprints view, see how they are just together, no space. You can see there's a space from this first edit text, the top of it to this. There's a bit of space, but the rest are just clustered, right? We'll fix that. It's basically just add a margin top, but let's finish up. So the next thing we want to add is what? What do we have in our design? Okay, the button, right? The button. So let's add the button. So I'm gonna just say button. So our button here, you can see it's wide, but you can see the start here, kind of just more like they're all starting on the same line, and even the end here, kind of like the same thing. So we're gonna stick to that. So for the button, or another thing I can actually just do is, instead of all these giving all this margin, right? Like I could just take out this two. Okay, I could leave the top of that, leave the top margin, or I could just take out these two and then just put it in the constraint layout. Just say a margin of 16 dp. So that will apply to everything, right? Because I'm putting it into the container, so it apply to everything. So let's just do that, so we don't have to start giving individual margins. Okay, so for the width, I want the width to, I'm going to use 0 dp to match the constraints, right? And then I want the height to wrap the content, right? So, and then, but I've not constrained it yet. So, so what do we want? The top should be to the bottom of the switch, right? Which the ID of that switch is called round up. You can see that the start should be the should be aligned to the start of the parent, and the end also should be aligned to the end of the parent. Right, so we're getting there, So we give our button a text, and the text is called calculate, right? Calculate. So by default, it gives you in uppercase, right? By default. So you can decide to change that if you want. Okay. So that's basically what we're just going to need for now. But of course we have to give it an ID called let's say calculate button. And then let's close out this guy. And what else do we have? What's the last thing we have? Okay, we have this text, tip amount. So this text is going to now calculate and show you the tip. Okay. So okay, we're missing something here, which is this guy. Okay, so I'll just do that by myself. Okay. Okay, so that means we need a text view, right? So just going to do that quickly. Wrap content, just close it and then give it an ID. I'm going to just call it tip results, the result of calculating the tip, right? And then it's going to be a text. For now, I'm just going to say tip amount, right? Which is what it is. And then aligning it, right? Constraining it. So top to bottom of the button, which is called the calculate button, right? Now I'm going to constrain the end to the end of what parents, and that should actually just be fine because that's we don't need to constrain it to the start because if we do, it's kind of we just stretch it and bring it to the middle, right? Let me just show you. If I do start to start of parents, you see, it just stretches it. So we don't want that other constraint. So now that's the thing about constraints. At least you should have at least one constraint on each side, right? On each side. Is either you have top right, top left, or you have bottom right, bottom left, or bottom start, bottom end. Okay. So yeah, I think we have been able to design this UI. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's it. We now have our UI. That's cool. Um, I would I would love to run this, right? But let's while I try to do that and probably show it to you on my device. Um, is there any question? Okay, if I would want to take questions now while I'm kind of running it, so probably just I'll just show it to you or how it looks like on my device. Well, if there's no question, I guess we'll probably just move on. It's pretty much pretty easy actually, right? It's not really it's not something that's too huge. So of course, I want to see this application definitely when you're going to actually submit this, right? It's very important. I'm going to see this. So, but when you're doing it, of course, you should have make sure you extract all your string resources, all your dimensions, and everything. Okay, so okay, we have done that. Let me share my mobile device so we can just see it. Okay, give me a second. So share. Okay, start now. So just okay. Okay, so yeah, you can actually see it. Yeah, so this is what we have. This is what we actually just built. So you can see this. I can toggle it off and on. Can toggle it on and off. So, but of course, one of the things we're going to be learning is how do we get this information? The user has actually toggled it off. How do we get that input? Okay, the user types in something in this cost of text. How do we get it, right? How do we know that the user has chosen good or okay, right? How do we know that to click on this and it shows the actual amount in this tip amount, right? So those are the things we're also going to be doing, okay? So let's get back to our Android Studio. See how much we can, cover. Yep. Let's see how much we can cover before our time runs out. So, like I said, you extract those string resources for me, and then we will be friends. Okay, I think that's we'll be friends. Okay, so move on, right? How can we calculate the tip? We have basically just designed the layout, right? So how can we actually do, the actual calculation, right? How can you do the actual calculation? So a few things you're going to learn, right? A few more things you're going to learn now, right? You're going to see how to, of course, you're going to see, we're going to leave. I've taught you find view by ID. Okay. I've taught you find view by ID. But here is the thing about find view by ID. As much as that is very, very cool, or as much as that is very, very nice, it's not really it's not the best ways to, call your views. Okay. Now, so let me give you an example. So this is how we're doing it, right? Well, let's say button of type button. We now say find this view by its ID. And let's say r.id dots. Let's just say this back button. So this is just an example. Now, but the thing is this, imagine building a project. Remember, we talked about variables, that variables are, they occupy space in memory. For every variable you create, you have what's allocated what space in memory. So imagine if you are building an application and you have over 50 views in one screen. So this is basically what we'll have. So I'll just keep duplicating. So it means that we'll create this number of what variables. We'll have find view by ID, find view by ID, find view by ID. And this is not what's cool. Okay. This is not cool. So we'll learn how to handle this, right? I'll also teach you how to work with decimal numbers, right? Using the double data type, how to format numbers as currency, how to use string parameters, right? We did that in Kotlin, but how do we now do it in, Android Studio, right? I also teach you how to use logcats, especially when you have problems in your application, so you can read, read errors, right, and know how to, fix them. Okay, so let's get into it. So talking about this, right? So this is not really cool, right? So we're going to be using a new method. I'm going to introduce you to what we call view binding. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to what we call view binding. Okay. So as the name implies, view binding, bind views, right? Bind the views together. Okay, as the name implies. So basically, we need to, in order to calculate, in order to be able to click on this calculate button, right? And give the user the tip, we'll need access to all our UI elements. We need access to the edit text, which is why we gave it an ID. We need access to the edit text. We need access to the radio button. We need access to the switch. We need access to this button also. We also need access to this text view, right? So all these are UI elements, right? We need to read input from it, right? But find view by ID, which is a way we reference our view, right, is not what's feasible. So Android framework now provided a method called we had this for more convenience, the feature called view binding. Okay. So basically what view binding does is that it it kind of makes it easier and even faster to call methods on the views in your UI, right? So we just need to, you don't need to, start doing find view by ID. No. So view binding just takes, so think of it, it's actually a class, right? What it does is that, so think of when you were creating classes and then you initialized your properties, you created properties inside, right? So that's what view binding kind of does. It's a class that now has all the IDs of your UI what elements. It houses all. So if you need it, you just create an instance of that class, right? And then you have access to the what ID. Okay. So but to do that, we need to set it up. So how do we set that up? We need to enable it. So I just go to my Gradle here. So the app level, right? I'm just going to double click on that. And then just below this line 32 of our Kotlin options, I'm going to just add this line of code, build features. Hope this doesn't take long because I'll need to build it, but build features, and then I'm just going to say view binding, and then I'll assign true. So that's just how you set it up. After that, then you sync. Whenever you make changes to your Gradle, you must sync. Very important. Okay, so while it's syncing, right? While it's syncing, so let's move on. So once it's done, right? Once it is done, this is basically what happens. It now creates a class, okay? Every activity or every class rather that, kind of has a UI, it kind of now will what create a binding class, right? It creates a binding class, which all you have to do is create an instance of that word class. So this is the format. This is tip activity. So when it is creating that binding class for you, the naming convention, it now does the reverse. So our class name will now be activity tip binding. Okay, that's just the convention. If your activity's name is main activity, when it wants to generate a binding class for your main activity, it's now called activity main binding. So it just reverses the name and then adds binding. So what do we do? First of all, we're going to introduce you to a few things, right? So I'm going to do what I call so there's this called late init var. I've spoken to you guys about this. This just means we are promising that we're going to initialize this variable later. For now, we just want to declare it. So I'm going to call my variable name binding, and then it's going to be of type what? So remember the convention, activity tip binding. So I should see it. You can see that here. Activity tip what? Binding. So this is the generated class, right? If I control and click on it, right, it takes me to my XML file because it's connected to this, right? So you can see that it takes me here, meaning that it has access to all these, these guys. As far as they have an ID, it has access to it. Okay, so that's actually just the very first step, right? The next step is to now initialize it, right? So in initializing it now, we don't need this guy like this to be presented this way, right? So what we then do, we now say binding that variable. We want to now initialize it. We now say activity tip binding dot inflate, and then we pass in an inflator, layout inflator. So this is just what we're just trying to do is to just do what set content view does. All right. But first of all, we want to get, want to instantiate this, and then we'll now do set content view. And then I'll now say binding dot root. So the root there, you can see, is the constraint layout. So bind this the content view now is we're now using this binding to get access to the root. Okay, and the root here is our constraint layout. So that means it is binding this guy, and this is like the view group. This is the container. So once it has access to the container, of course it has access to everything in the container. Okay, so you notice when I do binding dots, you see I have access. You can see all the IDs I created: calculate button, tip options, tip results, everything. So if I want to use it, I'll just say binding dot this. I have access, and then I can call any method I want to call on that. I don't need to create a variable to store my ID and do anything. Okay, so that's the interesting thing. Of course, there are much more. There's the data part of the data binding, but we'll get into that much later. Okay, so just a rundown again. The late init variable, right? It's basically just a keyword that promises that your code will initialize the variable before it uses it. If you forget to do it, your app is going to crash. Okay. So that's actually what's that. So what it basically now does, this one here, line 13, just initializes the binding object, initializes it, right? So yeah, so because with this object now, we now have access to views in this activities layout file. Okay, and then of course the set contents view, like we know, just sets the contents view of the activity. So instead of passing our layout dot activity underscore tip, right? What we basically now do is what specify the root of that hierarchy of your views, the root, whatever every other thing is, whatever view is kind of housing everything. That is actually your what root. Okay. So how do we use it, right? So this is your typical. So let's look at the difference, right? This is your typical find view by ID method. So let's see the difference. Var button of type button equals find view by ID, and then passing arrow.id.button. So this is how you would have used it, right? And then if you want to do something with it, we can now say button, right? Dot what? Let's say text, right? Well, this actually will just change the text from calculate to, let's say, submit. You can try that out, right? Make sure you try that out. Now, because I don't want to be running the code every time to show you guys. Okay, so this actually with what the old way with find view by ID. Okay, but with view what's it called? View binding, I could just do I could also do this, right? I could still create a variable called button. Sorry, this will throw an error because I'm using the same names conflicting, but which I should not, right? Which I should not, but I'm just trying to show us something. So of type button, right? So instead of saying find view by ID, I'm just going to say binding dot what, button one or wherever, right? So yeah, button, calculate button, because this is the views in this particular what activity, right? So, and then I can now say button with the object. Now this button, I have access to every method, like the text also, and then I could also say submit, right? So this is also view what binding, but much better with view binding, right? Much what's better, like the best way. The best way is just one line. And what's that one line? I'll just say binding dot calculate button, which gives me access to the view dot text, and then I'll say what submit. So you can see how it just evolved to just one line of code. So here I'm not storing any variable, right? This is also fine, but why create a variable? Why create that space, that memory location, right? You're just occupying space, right? So what is the best way? Just access the view, access the attributes, give it the value straight up. Okay, so that's actually what the concept of what view binding, right? So that's the concept of what view binding. So now how do we, let's go straight to calculating the tip, right? Let's go straight to calculating it. How do we calculate it? So the idea here is when you click on this calculate button, that's when the calculation should take place. So that means we have to set an on click listener on this button. We've talked about on click listener. So how do I do it? I'll just say binding dot calculate button dot set on click what listener. And I'm going to create a function that says what calculates tip, right? So when I click on this button, it should call this function. I don't have the function yet, so I'll just do Alt Enter and it will create the function for me. Okay, then I can now do what I want to do. Okay, so if you notice, very, very important, this my calculate function is inside the class. So one thing Android Studio helps you to do, when you click on the particular opening brace, you can see where it ends. So my private, this calculate tip is inside the class, but outside the onCreate function. So you should not have a function inside a function, right? That's basically what I just say. You can call a function inside a function, but you shouldn't have a function inside a function, like creating a function inside another function, right? Calling a function after inside a function, that's basically maybe the same function, that's basically recursive function. you're calling the same function. Okay, so that's that's basically basically that. Okay, so let's move on. So how do we calculate the tip, right? How do we calculate the tip? How do we calculate the tip? So first of all, if you look here, the first thing we need to get is this cost of service. So how much was the service? That's the very first thing we need to get. We get the cost of service, then we get the radio, get the option, then we round it up, and then we click on, then we want display. So that's the flow. Okay. So we need to get the cost of the word service. So the text which is going to be entered by the user is stored in the edit what text. This edit text means editable text, right? It's a text. So it's going to be stored as an editable text, but we need to get it as a number so we can use it for calculations. Okay, so remember you've converted, you've done to string, to int, and all those stuff, right? So we're going to apply the same thing here, but actually we're not going to do to int, we're going to do to double. Okay, so how do we actually do that? So first of all, in our function, we need to get the we need to get what the user has actually typed in. So I'm going to just say val cost of service, right? Val cost of service, and that's going to be, I'm just going to now say binding dot cost of service, or what did we call it? What did we call this guy? Text input. Okay, binding dot text input, right? Dot what else? Dot text, right? It has this edit, this text here. You can see it. It has two methods to either get or set a text. And then I'm going to convert it to string first, but we don't need it as a string. We need it as a double. So I'm going to now say to double. So double data type for decimal, right? Just doing that once and for all. Okay, so yeah, that's that. Okay, so the next thing, well, I've gotten that. The next thing is to now get the the next thing is to get the percentage. So how do we get that what percentage? Come on, like the option, right? Okay, so let's just do this. I'm going to create another variable called selected option, right? So how do we get the selected option? We actually just get it from the radio group, right? So binding dot the tip options, which is the radio group, dot, it has a property called checked radio button ID. So this will actually give us the particular radio button that was what selected. Okay, the particular radio button that was what selected. Now, but after giving it to us, right? It's not enough to just give it to us. We need to be able to, calculate the percentage. So if you gave us amazing, we should be able to calculate 20%. If you gave us good, we should be able to calculate 18. If you gave us okay, should be able to calculate 15. Yeah, so let's do that. Okay, so the percentage, I'm going to create another variable. Let me call it tip percentage. So how do we want to calculate the percentage? How do we want to calculate the percentage? So I'm going to use a when statement here, right? Now, when the selected option here, because when you click on maybe 10%, it stores that it is 10% that was clicked on, right? So when the selected option is, so we're using a when statement here. When it is r.id dot 20% option 20, when it is option 20, we want the value of 2% to be 0.20. 0.20 is 20%. That's 20 over 100, right? When it is option 18, that means this is going to be 0.18, which is 18%. So if it is not any of those two, else it's basically going to be what, 0.15, which is 15%. So that's basically the percentage there, right? Else, yeah. So that's basically that. So what have we done? We've gotten the cost of the service, the particular option that was selected, we're storing it here, and we're using that to actually get the percentage. That's basically what we're doing. We're using that to what get the what percentage. So so far, this is the function to calculate the tip so far, right? But we have not actually calculated it what yet. Okay, we have not calculated it what yet. So how do we calculate the tip? Very simple. I'm going to create the variable called tip. And how do you calculate it? It's very simple. It's just the tip percentage multiplied by the cost of service. That's basically that. And that will give you, the what's it called? The tip, right? That's basically what will give you the tip. Okay. But we still have a few things here. We kind of want to round this up. But before I round this up, let's just let's before we even round up, let's actually kind of view what we have. So since this is the tip, right? Let me use that variable to be sure that we have calculated something. So we want to display whatever we calculate here on this tip result, right? And it's a text, it's expecting a text. So I'm just going to say binding dot tip result, which is a text view dot text. I want to set the text now to the what? I want to the tip, but the tip is a double, while text view expects a text, right? So you can see that. That's why you can see type mismatch, required character sequence, found double. So I'm just going to add this to string. And then that's basically that. Okay. So for this one, I basically just want to run this actually. So we see there are a few things we still need to do, like rounding it up and the likes, right? But let's just check this out, right? So I'm just gonna run it, and then um let's see what we have. So we still have to round it up, right? And then we still have to kind of display it, like I said, with we have to format it to a currency display, right? And then yeah, I think those are the two things that we have left, just to format it. But before then, let's just display and see that we have actually done something. So it's still building. Okay, so um, okay, so we're going to reinstall and restart. Okay. We're going to reinstall and restart. So, okay. So let me share my, okay. Okay, so this is what we have. So let's see, cost of service. Let's say I do 5.8, sorry, right? And then the default is 20% now, right? So let me click on calculate. So you can see 1 point, showing 1.6, but it's too close to the it's too close to the edge. So the tip amounts, let me kind of bring it out a bit, or better still, yeah, let me just bring it out a bit by adding a margin end to it of, let me just say, for now, just so we'll see it, I'm going to change it later. So I'm just adding a 20 dp to it. Then let me just run that again. So that should show quickly, actually, shouldn't take much time. Just applying changes. Okay, so good. So 5.8, I click on calculate, you see 1.16, right? If I click on 18%, you see 1.04. If I click on 15%, which is 0.87. So we're actually calculating the tip, right? But of course, as far as currency is concerned, you can't give somebody 0.87 cents. If assuming we're using dollar now, right? That have to do with cents and the likes, or naira and kobo. You can't give somebody, how do you calculate 87 kobo? We need to be able to round it up, right? That's the essence of this roundup. It's supposed to round up, but we have not implemented that yet. If not, when we click on this check to round it up. So yeah, this actually works, right? It works. So let's head back, and hopefully we have more enough time to get it done. If we don't, probably we'll just move that to tomorrow, to Friday, right? So let me stop sharing. Okay, so where do we go from here? Okay, so let's round it up, right? I think that's the first thing. So um first thing we need to do is to round it up. Okay, so sometimes this may actually show. So whatever this happens, don't be frightened, right? You can just try to get it again and everything will be fine. Okay, so let's actually now do this. So how do we for this switch element, right? Okay, we can basically just check. It has this attribute called check, right? Yeah, so we can use this attribute to know if the user has checked it or not. Okay, so let's say var roundup. Let's say roundup request. If you checked it, then it's a request, right? So let's just call it roundup request. Okay, so that'll be binding dot the roundup, which is the switch. Then it has this option is checked. So this is going to return a true or false, right? To return a true or false. That's basically what it will do. So since it's returning a true or false, we can now do a check. So if roundup request, what do we want to do? Okay, if roundup request, if it is true, remember your conditional. So if whatever is here is true, it will run this right here, to run the content of this in the scope. So if it is true, our tip, want to update our tip, that's why you use the var here. So if it is true, I want to round it up. So there's this don't worry, I'm just going to use an inbuilt this thing called the kotlin.math.seal, and then I'll just pass in the tip. So this will just round it up for me. Okay, so this is just a method. So you can see it rounds the given value x to an integer, right? It rounds it up to and what integer, right? So that's what so if the roundup request, if it is checked, if it is true, then round up this what tip. That's just basically what we are actually doing. Okay, so the next thing now is to format it, right? Let's see how can we actually format this tip. All right, how can we format the tip? So let's say I'm going to just go out of this guy and create a variable who actually look at this code well to optimize it. So var formatted tip is equal to, so to format based on currency, so there's this number, and use the number class format, and then we have this dot get currency instance, right? And then dot format, and then I'm going to pass in the tip. Okay, yeah, so that's basically just how you can actually do that. Okay, okay, so let's well yeah, so after doing that, I think I can just so now it's the formatted tip now that we want to actually display, right? That's what we want to display. But if you notice, when we ran the application, it was just showing us the number. Well, I kind of want it to be formatted in a particular way as a string, to display it, right, as kind of like a string, you know, formatted, formatted string kind of thing. So this is basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my values, go to my strings, right? And then I'm going to create a string here, call it, or better still, kind of just make things fast. Duplicate this. I'm going to call it tip amount. The name of this string will be tip amount. And the value, so yeah, I'm going to introduce you to something here, right? The value is going to be tip amount. That's what is going to be displayed, right? And then I'm going to just add something you've probably not seen, and that is percent, sorry, percent, let's say percent s. So what does this mean, right? What does this mean? Basically that percent s just acts as a placeholder, right? So it will display tip amount, then whatever you pass in as a value will now be displayed here. So it's just a placeholder. Okay, it's just a placeholder. So that's where our formatted tip is going to what be inserted. So we'll have tip from tip amount colon then 2.5 or 5.8 or whatever. So how do we use it? How do we use it? So instead of, so here I'm going to just take this guy out, right? Of course, that's not where we want to display it. So we want to do that after here. So how do we get to use it? Okay, just simple. I'm going to just say, so I'll just paste this guy here, but cut this one. So I need to call that string that I created, right? I need to call it. So I need access to it. So I'm going to use the method called getString, right? And then a getString, you can see it takes in an integer which is the ID, right? And then some this var args means variable arguments, right? So the ID is r.string dot tip amount, which is what we named it, and then we'll pass in the formatted what tip. So this formatted tip is now what is going to be placed in this placeholder here, right? Okay, so that's actually how we can, that's basically how we can, do that, right? So this is how it's going to look. So let me just show you how what we did is going to look. So I'm going to use the tools text instead of this. So I don't want this Android text because this one actually, if you notice when we run it, it shows or showing you tip amount. But there's also this tools text. So this tools text, this is basically what's how it will display tip amount colon, let's say 10. Where is my dollar sign? Okay, so this is how it's going to actually show. So, but if you notice, I use tools. So this is just for design time. This tools attributes are for design time when using the tools namespace. Design time meaning you only see it where you're designing, but when you run it, you don't see it. And I'll show you. All right. So yes, let's okay, yeah, we'll test it. I think I'll just finish this up today. I think we are done. Just a few checks and balances. And we talk about log cuts much later. Maybe sorry, the next class, right? So let's run this and see what we have. Let's run it and see what we have. So okay, so I'm gonna just stop sharing and share my Android device. So this is what we did before. So you should clear this and try to run it again. Okay, so yeah, so it's cleared. So we still have that 5.8, but we'll do something about that, right? So let's still use our 5.8. Remember when we did 18%, it gave us a decimal. So now, and it's checked. So let me uncheck this first. Let me uncheck this and choose 18, calculate. So you can see total amount is 1.04 euro. Okay. So this is giving us euro. So you can actually do it to your local currency, which I'll leave that up to you. So let's just do 15. Okay, so you notice we have not told it to round anything up, right? So, but when I choose the round up, listen, check it. You can see it rounds up to 2. So one is rounded up to 1 because we don't round up 0.87 rounded up to 1. So yeah, it actually works, right? Yeah, it works. Cool. Okay, but we still have let's just do one or two things, right? Just one or two, and then we call it timeouts. One or two, and then we call it timeouts. Okay. Getting back to our Android Studio, let's see. So what else should we do? Right. Okay, so there was something I forgot to show you, right? Now, one of the things you need to do, let me just quickly show you that, okay? Um, is that you need to understand that users, right? They can actually just a user can actually just, you know, do the unthinkable, right? And I'm going to give you an example of what is unthinkable, right? Now, just let's look at this, right? Now, when we were calculating, you noticed that um, first of all, this is how it should run the very first time. It's empty, right? Now, somebody that is actually normal, right, will definitely put in a value, let's say 2.69, and then we'll try to calculate, right? Then we're having all these values, right? They will round it up. But it's very possible that your user decides that, okay, you know what? I don't want to type anything, right? And then it goes to click calculate. You see the app crashes. Your app crashes, right? So I'm going to show you that. We're going to do that again, right? I'm going to do that again, right? So let me just run it again, and then I want us to um okay, so let me do it from my let me share my Android Studio. Of course, you've already seen how it run, but basically, okay, good, interesting. I get to see the error when it crashed. Okay, so let me just show you. Let me show you. Just give me a second. Um, Switch. Okay, good. So when that happens, right, all you have to do is click on this lock cat here, right? Once you run your application and it crashes, just come to lock cat. Okay, and then you just have to scroll till you find your error, where you have red all over. Okay. So you can notice that when we actually did that, our app crashed. Okay. And then what's the error? It was she said, look at number format exception, empty what string. So we didn't put anything. And then if you notice in our code, we are getting what the cost of the service, converting it to a string, and then converting it to a double. And then we are now using that cost of service and we're multiplying it by the percentage. But now the user entered what? Nothing. So can you convert nothing to a string? Can you convert nothing to a double? Can you do percentage times nothing? You understand? So that's where that crash actually what comes in, right? So you need to be able to read your log, right? Your log cards, and get to understand why you're having that what crash. Okay. So how do we solve that, right? How do we solve that? So because that empty string, right, is basically just telling you that it found an empty string when it should actually have a string with a value, right? That's basically that's actually that. So if you keep going, you can see, pass double. You can actually even helps you tell you where that error must have occurred. You can see in line 22 of your tip activity, which was then called in line 18 because we are calling the function here and the likes, right? So you probably just have to, that's how you can, pick up your errors, right? So one of the things we can do, so this brings us to null. We talked about null in Kotlin, right? Null meaning what? Um, no value. Because it's a special value that basically just means what? No what? Value. Okay, so it's different from your normal int data type and the right, or double. The default double value, is 0.0, right? The default value for string is just an empty string. The default value for int is 0. But null does not really have that this thing. It's just empty, right? It's just what? Empty. So many values expect a value, and a lot of times they don't know how to handle null. So what they just mean, they just crash, they just stop. So that's why Kotlin actually tries to limit where null is used, right? So what we can do is that our app can check for null being returned from this. So what I can do is, instead of saying to double, I can just say to double, or there's a method called to double or null. Okay, this can actually just help save us that what stress. Okay, but yeah, that's actually okay, right? That's actually okay. So with this, your application will not crash actually, right? Your application will not what? Crash. Okay, but well, just not all bugs actually, because in development you hear about bugs a lot. Not all bugs. So well, once we change this to double or null, right? We now have to add this double quotes here, because this means that this is nullable, right? Okay, but apart from this, right, not all bugs actually cause your app to crash. Sometimes the results, the expected results might actually just be confusing, right? May actually just be what's confusing. So sometimes it's actually good to, just like when we open the app and we still saw the same value there, we want it to be cleared up, right? So, but instead of this, right, or even if I leave this, instead of actually this, I can decide to do a check here and then say if just below this, I can say if cost of service equals null, return. I can do something like this, right? Now, of course, there's this better way to do it, right? I can actually just, you know, take it out, right? Because it is not, but sometimes you actually have to do, certain checks, right? You can actually do certain checks, kind of like hard code it, right? But you can always simplify, because here it says it's always false, right? It's always false, but that's not always the case, right? That's not always the case. So you can actually do something like this, right, to return it, or you can just basically just do the double or null. Sorry. And then just add this here. So that actually works. Now, but another thing I want us to do is to clear, just clear it, right? Right. Just clear it. Okay, so uh I did something. Okay. So let's just do some. Let's see. I want to still do that check because I also want to do something. So if cost of service, if the cost of the service is equal to null, I want to do something. I want to just, before it actually even does anything, the binding dot tip result dot text, I want to just make it what? Empty string. When you run it again, I probably, you open the app. I need everything to just, kind of refresh, right? And then I'll just return. So return means once you run this, right, you can just go out of this if what statement. So this will clear up the tip amount before returning from that calculate what tip, right? So that's just a few things that you can actually just do. Then with this, we can kind of just um, modify our code to kind of follow some best practices, right? First of all, these are function this particular variable, because a variable declaration could be inlined. What does inlined mean? So this is inlined. So instead of here, we're saying we are creating a variable called selected option, and we are just storing the result of if this is true or false. So instead of creating a variable to store it, I would rather just do this here. So when binding.tip option, when the checked radio button, this will return true or false. So when it will return an ID now, right? To return whichever radio button was clicked. So when that is any of this, you don't need to create this variable, right? So that's actually us just, trying to update a few things, right? Another thing you could also do, right? Another thing we can actually also do is, let's see. We're basically just trying to remove some unnecessary variables, right? Okay, like the example is this one, roundup request. Here we're storing true or false if this has been checked. So just cut this. No, sorry. So let's remove unnecessary variables, right? Okay, so that's actually that, right? That reduces work for us, right? Okay, so yeah. What else? What else? What else? What else can we do? So a few other things, we can actually, do, right? But I'm just going to stop here and probably just finish up in our next class. We are out of time. Okay, so do well to follow the video and build your own application on a separate project, right? Do make sure you do that, right? So because on Friday we're going to finish it. It's just a few things left. We'll finish it and then we'll talk about the app theme, right? We're going to talk about app theme and material design, how we can make the application look much much more beautiful, right? Following the design material design principles. Okay, so are there any questions before we call it a timeout? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, none. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so guys, thank you very much for your time, and we'll meet on Friday. We'll also meet on the workspace. If you have any questions, just ask there. Thank you very much.